But anyway, we're here to introduce something called protection money, which is basically a deal where people with power protect completely powerless people like you.
Yeah, but I don't understand the...
Yeah, no, that's the concept.
Today we're going to look at how to achieve total galactic conquest and install yourself as the Padishah Emperor of the known universe by the first roughly 50 years. We are going to be taking full advantage of the Xenophile ethic, traditionally used for making friends, which we are going to do in a more roundabout way. As the old adage goes, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So let's dive in and find out how to catch a galaxy full of flies. The first thing you probably notice about this empire is that it is a little different. There are two main aspects to this build which you really need to go for. The first is Xenophile. This is an ethic that you probably haven't seen in any of my other meta build videos, and specifically here it is completely necessary, and in fact you could, if you wanted, go for Fanatic Xenophile, and this would actually make this build twice as powerful as it otherwise would be. Why is it going to be so powerful? Well, Xenophile, the first line here reads, increased opinion for other species. That means that both ourselves and other species, when we're in contact with them, will get a positive opinion modifier that sums up to better relations, meaning we like each other more. What this means is that this meta build, this empire, is specifically for single player use, because in multiplayer, extra relations with another player empire doesn't mean diddly squat if that player doesn't like you. After that, I think you need to go for Imperial, as then we can unlock the Feudal Society. Now, Feudal Society is a civic that had a big rework with the Overlord or patch 3.4 update. Now what it does is all of your leaders do not cost unity upkeep if employed, but they cannot be dismissed. In addition, your governors will generate unity equal to their level. This gives you basically a plus 10 unity bonus at the start of the game, and this will continue on into the mid and late game, as you will never have to pay any unity upkeep for your leaders as long as you keep them employed, which you really should be doing. Yes, you won't be able to re-roll leaders, but you can do funny things like putting an admiral onto a ship and flying it into a combat that it cannot win, and therefore letting the admiral die. Or alternatively, putting a scientist on a science ship and flying it into an ether drake. After that, your subjects will be gaining an additional +1 monthly loyalty. That's going to be really big for what we're doing, and you will also not suffer penalties from having multiple subjects. Yes, you then have some restrictions with your subjects. They cannot have expansion prohibited, you cannot go for the do not join subject wars, and you cannot limit their diplomacy all the way down to limited. But we'll be able to work around that, so don't worry at all, ladies and gentlemen. After that, everything else is down to your opinions. Now, I would recommend Authoritarian. That is going to save us from having to take an entire tradition, which will speed up the rate you'll be able to do this build. But otherwise, everything else is just up to you. I quite enjoy Masterful Crafters, it's quite powerful, and later on I'm going to be showing off using this build against a Grand Admiral no scaling AI, which is, as you might know, very, very dangerous now in the 3.4 update, so I'm going to go for all of the help I can get. In terms of traits, these are some good ones. Basically pick whatever you'd like. I mean, you could go for this build and go for something like a Void Dweller start, you could go for a Relic World start, you could go basically anything you'd like, as long as you are Xenophile to some degree, and you've also got Feudal Society, which does need Imperial. At the very start of the game, I would recommend you basically do whatever you would normally do in a game of Stellaris. Expand your empire, grow, build colonies, and go out and meet new worlds and new civilizations. In this case, I've gone for Prosperity as my first tradition, it's one of my favourite, and I think very powerful, and then Executive Vigour, which means I can unlock the capacity subsidies and fortify the border edict without going over my edict fund cap. For your next tradition, you need to take the diplomacy tradition, unless you don't have the authoritarian ethic, and then you'll need to have the domination. The finisher here for domination is that it grants access to the hegemony federation type, and we are going to be using the hegemony federation type to do a little bit of legal manipulation and have great fun with our vassals. I've jumped over here to the Grand Admiral run that I was doing. That first run you saw was actually in Grand Admiral scaling. This is now no scaling, so the AI is at the highest difficulty straight away. I've met my first empire. This is the Hive Mind, and they're currently wary of me. But what we want to do is we want to change that up, because we are here to make friends. And as you're going to find out, having friends is the most powerful thing you can do in a single player game of Stellaris. To that end, make sure you send some diplomats to improve relations, and you should have lots of these envoys available to send out as diplomats, because you get an extra one both from the diplomacy tradition and from being some degree of Xenophile. Now this won't solve all of our relationship problems. What we're also going to have to do is pay our new friends off. In this case, it turns out that our AI friends are very happy to have some consumer goods from us, because they're a hive mind and don't actually have access to any consumer goods, which makes them quite like these, I believe. But basically, give them whatever it is that they need without breaking your own economy to get at least plus 100 acceptance here. That's going to go straight into our relationship, as you can see, and we've gone from being wary up to cordial. Possibly we could have gone to neutral, but it doesn't matter. Anything at minus 100, even minus 115 as we were, get a plus 100 bonus. And if you're enjoying this video, please make friends with that like button, and then look into forming something like a research agreement. This is going to build up trust, which is basically like extra opinion. If they weren't a hive mind, I would offer to set up a commercial pact as well, and possibly even a migration treaty. Once you've improved relations with them, you're going to want to try to form a federation. Now, if they don't want to form a federation with you, which I'm going to guess is very likely, especially if you're going for the hegemony type, which may occur extra penalties, we can actually go for a bit of a workaround. Now, this workaround is probably better than attempting to form a federation with the first AI neighbor you'll meet, and then you will be competing for the presidency of the hegemony with that AI neighbor, and you don't want to do that. Your federation partner should be as weak as you can possibly get. To that end, I've begun colonizing this desert world, which is a 0% habitability world for my people. And I've also made sure that I don't have any systems adjacent to this world, because what I'm going to do once the colony is complete is I will release this as a vassal, and then release the vassal and form a federation with them. In order to release this colony as a vassal, you'll need to make sure that it is first a sector, and then we go over to our planets and sectors menu, and we can click, it's very easy, create vassal. Simply choose the name of the vassal you want to make. Now, this screen here shows you all of the different vassal contract stuff, and you could attempt to change this around and pay some influence, but don't bother, just close the screen. Then you should engage in some diplomacy with your new vassal. First off, send up some improved relations, establish an embassy, establish a commercial pact, and possibly even a research agreement as well. We want to get a whole bunch of pacts in, and that will boost the relations between us, which will help us form a federation in just a moment. Now that we've got all of that underway, I'm going to release them as a subject, and then I'll still need to get an extra 32 acceptance in order to form a federation, but that's quite simple to get around. Simply give them some resources like food that they don't have much of, and with their opinion boosted sufficiently, they should then be ready to form a federation. The reason we want to go for a hegemony over any other federation types is that a hegemony has some very interesting rules and regulations. And if we jump into the law screen of our new federation, you'll see that the laws around who is in charge are very different to most other federations. The succession type here is set to strongest, and it's weighted by diplo weight. So you want to make sure that your diplomatic weight is higher than your vassal, and that should be very easy because you have set them up as a tiny little non-empire. Other than that, invitation of members, kicking members, that's all up to you as the president, and war declarations are down to a majority vote. You'll also start out with some fleet contribution, and everyone will be able to construct fleets. Now, this fleet contribution here is going to help us later on with keeping our subjects or our partners in line. But we shouldn't forget about our new best friend, our neighbor, who we have some great relationships with. Now we are friendly with them. This is because we've given them great trade deals, we are improving relations, and we're building up a whole host of trust thanks to these agreements. So let's recap our relationship. We've given them lots of resources, we're a great friend in that way. We've also given them access to our technologies, fantastic. But what are we doing to guarantee their protection and survival? Absolutely nothing. For that reason, we should propose subjugation. Now, what you're probably going to see when you attempt to do this is that you have a big negative modifier here for acceptance. In this case, it's only -40, but I've seen so high as it be -350 or beyond at this point. What you will need to do to combat that is make sure to spend lots and lots of alloys on building up a navy. Just 1k of navy at this point in the game should do, unless you're dealing with an advanced AI. Just a regular AI here, though, is the deal. That's going to push up our fleet power, our diplomatic weight from fleet, and we want to make sure that they are at least only superior to us from a military perspective, if not equivalent. And that should get rid of any relative power modifiers. But we still have this -40 to overcome after we've done that. So let's look at giving them such a great deal they couldn't possibly say no. I'd recommend you make sure that you restrict their voting. That's going to be quite nice later on and very important in the Federation, and regulate their expansion so that they must pay you some extra influence every time they build new star bases. After that, don't touch any of the contribution stuff because we simply can't afford it. It will be too much of a negative modifier. But now we can give them the deal of the century when it comes to military law. First off, I'd recommend you go for no overlord conflicts here, and that means that they will not be forced to join you in any of your wars. And on the other hand, you should tell your subjects you will happily join them in all of their wars, both offensive and defensive. Make sure to grant them some vassal holdings, and you might as well throw in unified census because it's basically free anyway. Now we've got to a positive here, we're at +10, and they're going to accept this vassal deal, which is actually a very good deal for them. Basically, it should mean that they can do whatever they want, except they are restricted a little bit with voting, and we have to fight with them whenever they call us to arms. And there it goes, they have accepted. And what we're going to find straight away is the influence we spent on this vassalship should be pretty much refunded to us as we establish a whole host of communications with this empire, especially at this early point in the game, as it is only 2217. So here we go, we've just gained a whopping 200 something influence, and oh no, it looks like our vassal failed to take into account some key aspects. Because we are in a federation and specifically a hegemony, which our subjects must be allowed to join, that means our vassal has now become a member of this hegemony. And that means no matter what, they can't actually declare war on anyone, because that is a federation law which will supersede these vassal contracts. And even though we've told them they don't have to join any of our wars, because they're in a federation with us, they absolutely will.
Kaboom! You've been lawyered.
And now we've got some new potential friends on the horizon. These friends were revealed to us by getting that first vassal, and they are going to be, at the very worst, wary or suspicious of us unless there's something like a fanatic purifier, and we should then be able to improve relations with them and offer them some great trade deals and buy their love. When you get your first vassal, they're also going to start off probably with negative loyalty, but they should have some fantastic monthly loyalty changes. This will be down to the great deal you've given them, and they should in almost no time get up to that juicy +100 loyalty. But it's important we help them along with this, and to do that I'm going to recommend you always, and this is always, build as the first holding the Overlord garrison building on their world. This is going to give plus 0.5 loyalty per month change, and on top of that, if they're still struggling to understand how much of a great friend you are, you can send 3 of your armies to this planet, land them here, and you'll get an additional 1.5 monthly loyalty for a total change of +2. Don't forget you should also renegotiate your contract with the vassal after 5 years. The main things you should get out of this renegotiation are more holdings, and you should start grabbing a subsidy of some kind from this vassal. The first vassal you take, I'd recommend you just get some basic resources from. You might need to do this in 2 stages. First go to 15% and then go something higher than that 5 years later, because that's going to really help boost our economy. As you can see here, we're getting 120 energy and 100 extra minerals in subject taxes, which means we can shift off our production into other more important things like science, alloys, and consumer goods. But what do you think about the Xenophile ethic? Is it really the most powerful ethic now in Stellaris? Let me know down in the comments below. It's now 22:29 and we're also ready to make our second friend our second best friend. We've got a commercial pact along with a research agreement, and we've also noticed that these friends are actually overlords of another potential friend, and this is something you really want to look out for, because if you propose subjugation to one empire and they have any vassals of their own, you'll gain extra vassals in the deal. Again, they don't quite want to accept our vassal overlordship right at the beginning, but we can quickly change that around by moving the contract terms, as you can see here. It's 30 years into the game, we've managed to create one of our own vassal empires, subjugate 3 other empires, and now we control a fairly decent portion of the galaxy and thus have quite high relative power. But you must be careful. Don't take too many vassals too soon without getting some great tributes from them, because the relative power of all of your subjects acts as an opinion modifier on each subject specifically. So if you have too many powerful subjects, you will end up with them hating you, and that will bring down their loyalty per month, as a key aspect of loyalty per month is actually subject opinion. Now we've got another empire here who just went to war with one of our potential friends and made them a vassal, and unfortunately for us, they are absolutely overwhelming in fleet power. That means that what you will now need to do is start building up lots and lots of ships in order to get rid of this overwhelming advantage and make it just superior. Because if we try to propose subjugation at the moment, we first off got a big modifier there from distance, but on top of that, we've got a massive minus 375 relative power modifier, and we need to annul that. It's taken 5 years, but I've managed to push them down to superior, and that now means I can propose vassalization. As ever, we will give them the normal terms, and that way they will happily accept, thinking that they are going to get nothing but our protection and not be forced to do anything they don't want to do. And that gives us basically about a quarter of the entire galaxy. Yes, we've got 5 vassal empires. Some of them do have some problems with monthly loyalty, but we can deal with that quite easily with an overlord garrison. The second holding building I'm going to recommend you build on all of your vassal worlds is the Ministry of Truth. This one basically is going to give you extra influence, and more influence will simply speed up the process and the time it takes in order to get extra vassals, because we need influence to negotiate these vassal contracts and do everything in that arena. Each of these propaganda jobs is going to give you about 0.2 to 0.3 influence depending on the difficulty level, and the funny thing about this build is the higher the difficulty level, the better the AIs you're going to be taking over, because they'll be having fantastic difficulty bonuses, and therefore the bigger of a snowball effect you'll start to see. We're now at 2243, and I've spent the last 10 years basically working on the vassal contracts to make sure that I'm getting the best bang for my buck here. Each of my vassals is giving me some of their resources. As you can see, I'm getting basic resources and research, or advanced resources, very nice things which are boosting my overall economy. On top of that, I'm making a whopping 9.6 influence per month from power projection, my governing ethic authoritarian, propaganda jobs in all of my vassals, and then the base income you'll get normally. Don't worry about the fact that you won't be leveling up your hegemony, because you'll be adding vassals so thick and fast that it keeps going down to minus 100 cohesion and simply doesn't gain any XP. You'll still be able to max out this federation, you just won't be able to do it until you've pretty much conquered the whole galaxy. I've now built up a pretty sizable fleet. I've got around 12k worth of ships, and that will mean when I now go to one of the AI empires somewhere and attempt to propose subjugation with them, as long as they are happy, and don't forget you do need to keep going out and sending out envoys to improve relations with all of the neighboring empires on the outskirts of your new empire, you should then get a whopping plus modifier here from relative power. And that should mean that if we do all of the normal things we regularly do here, we should also be able to ask for something crazy like a massive research subsidy or a massive resource subsidy right out of the gate. And now you're going to get into the snowball effect mode of this build. What will happen is you will add a vassal to your empire, as you can see I've just done. That will increase your relative power, at which point you can then go to one of their neighboring empires and propose subjugation with them as well. The only thing you'll actually be limited by is the amount of influence you can generate and spend. And here we are in 2255, and we have basically now subjugated the entire galaxy. In honor of this, I've actually renamed my capital to Imperial Sea Corps, as we are the president and emperor of the Empire of the Sea, and we're getting some absolutely insane production. The entire galaxy is paying us in protection money, and that's going straight into our bank account, which we were then able to use to fund our expansion. The stage where it flips from being one empire at a time into the exponential growth stage is especially fun. And I believe with a build like this, you could actually face the crisis in the year 2250 roughly, because you would have a complete and unified galaxy, all unified around a single empire, that is you, the player. And we've done all of this with only our starting world and 2 guaranteed habitable worlds. This is an absolutely bonkers build. Feudal Society Xenophile is very, very powerful. Go out there, have fun, enjoy yourself in single player, and see what you can do. You may know where you want to get to, but sometimes it's hard to know how to get there. It is very important to pick the right traditions with this build in order to maximize your relative power and therefore leverage your potential amongst your neighbors. To that end, I'd recommend you take a look at this video on traditions to find out which traditions are great and which ones you probably shouldn't be picking if you want to achieve galactic dominance.